Good morning, and welcome to In the Word Wednesday with Pastor Ron. I'm Pastor Ron Bopp, and I want to welcome you to In the Word Wednesday with Pastor Ron here in Waverly, Iowa. I'm recording this morning from my home. The COVID-19 situation has caused us to close the church down for a few weeks, so as best we can, we are trying to remain connected through recordings and live streaming. Today, I've chosen the Old Testament lectionary for our reading. You know, there's something I love about the Bible. Wherever we go in it, we can open it up and it always speaks to our current situation. Well, today, the scripture that I've chosen is the Old Testament lectionary from Judges, chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. This is the beginning of Deborah's story. She is a judge in Israel. Now, the judges came into being one after another between Moses and the Jewish kings. Deborah is the judge at this particular time. She's leading the Jewish people. And of course, she runs into political problems. Nothing new for the Jewish people. So we ask ourselves this question: how does a story that's 3,100 years old speak to us today? Well, let's take a look at Judges chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazar. Caesarea, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim. Because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried to the Lord for help. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." It's interesting as we read this story how much it parallels our situation, our time today. There are some, considering what has just occurred in the last week, who believe that we've now been given, here in America, we've been given into the hands of an evil king. Some believe that we've been in the hands of an evil king. Whichever side that you're on, there's still wringing of hands and gnashing of teeth. What are we to do, we ask? Do we believe the talking heads on TV, the pollsters and the commentators, who are more wrong than they're ever right? It's amazing to me that these individuals who do their entire careers nothing but reporting what other people do. They never do anything on their own. But suddenly, after a certain amount of time, when they're older, they're suddenly gurus. They're all knowing. And we hang on their every word. Do we listen to the politicians? Well, they're the ones that created the mess we're in. Who then should we be listening to? Well, in the story of Deborah, Deborah was a judge raised up by God. In fact, all the judges were chosen specifically by God to lead the Israelite people. They weren't kings, they weren't queens, they weren't religious leaders. God did with the judges as he does throughout the Bible. He raises up a simple, faithful believer. Notice that I said that it wasn't the religious leaders, not a pope, not the Archbishop of Canterbury, not even United Methodist bishops. Look for people that God has raised up in your life. Someone whose advice stands in line with God without political agenda. It might be a pastor. It might be a parent. It might be a trusted friend or a brother or a sister, a relative. It might be a child. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus writes that we are to give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God. He is responding to a challenge by the religious leaders who were trying to trip him up and get him into trouble by having him, or trying to have him, separate and say that they shouldn't follow the law, they should only follow God. But Jesus' answer is, give me a coin. Whose picture is on this coin? Well, it was the picture of Caesar. And so Jesus responds to them and he says, give back to Caesar what is Caesar and give back to God what is God. Well, simply put, our obligations as citizens are what we need to give to Caesar, to the king, to the nation. But trust is what we are to give to God. If we continue on in the story of Deborah, we know that she tells Barak, her top commander, her number one general, of God's promise to deliver the Canaanites into his hands. But if we keep reading, Barak doesn't believe her. In fact, he says to her, well, sure, I'll go, but only if you go along. Well, Deborah said, of course I will. But the reward, the victory will not be yours. Deborah goes and she carries the day, and the battle is won. You see, human power, human wisdom doesn't stand before God's. The judges came about before the kings of Israel. In fact, God was disappointed in the Israelites because they said, we don't want judges anymore, we want a king. In fact, they demanded a human king. God says, I'm your king. But they wanted a human king. They wanted to be like everybody else. Well, if we continue to read in the Bible, and Chronicles, and 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings, almost every time the story of a king, a Jewish king, comes up, after it gives his name, it says, he did evil in the eyes of God. Why? Because kings, politicians, leaders generally have their own self-interest, their own agenda placed before God's. Friends, kings and politicians come and go. But God is the single constant in our lives and for all time. Well, I'm Pastor Ron here in Waverly, Iowa, where it's a rainy day and it's cold and miserable outside, and we're hoping for better things to come. For now, I want to wish you and your family God's blessings for health and safety during these times. I'm Pastor Ron saying, till next Wednesday, goodbye for now.